Howdy ho, Baraboo. Woo. Thank you so much. What a pluperfect joy to be back here at the Ed Fest with you faithful Barabooians, you feisty fighters for common sense and the common good, you corporate greed whackers and political butt kickers. Always good. And I thank you for allowing a scruffy Texas populace to join you on this sunny day here at the Sauk County Fairgrounds for this 9th edition of the three-ring spectacular Babalooza and all-day hog calling contest that we've got going here. And I want to start my little peroration here by asking you to join me in thanking all of the volunteers who make this happen, led by His Edness, Ed Garvey. Terrific work that these folks do. You know, one thing I really like about Ed is that he understands that battling the bastards is about as much fun as you can have with your clothes on, you know, and who really wants to see Ed naked? I mean, no. So keep battling, Ed, and keep your clothes on, please. That's all that we ask of you. And battle we must. We live in strange times, do we not? Let us explore just a little bit of the strangeness. The Wall Street bankers that Lisa was just talking about who crashed our economy, now right back to getting their multi-million-dollar bonuses, while the crashees, the victims of their narcissistic greed, are getting pink slips and eviction notices. And yet we have the bankers themselves saying, no, you should not be condemning us, you should be cheering us, because we are, after all, a charitable group of people. Goldman Sachs, the CEO of which said that he's doing God's work. Goldman Sachs set aside $20 billion this year for bonuses for the top bankers. Yet they said, yeah, we did do that, but we also created a $1 billion pool, a $1 billion charity for some of those crashees. So see, we should be loved. Well, I'm going to tell you a quick story about what the gods think of charity. It's a story that Earl Long used to tell when he was governor of Louisiana. And Earl told a story about a rich man who died and tried to get into heaven. But if you went to the little Methodist church that I did in Denison, Texas, growing up, you know you just don't go into heaven. You've got to appear before the pearly gates, and there's an angel going to review your life. And then St. Peter is going to decide whether you get to come through or not. So here comes this rich man. And the angel looks over his life and said, my God, you never did no good for nobody, no way. What are you doing here? And a rich man said, well, now, that's not entirely true. In 1924, there was a blind beggar man on the street, and I put a nickel in his cup. And the angel said, so? And the rich man said, well, in 1935, there was a widow woman on the street. She needed car fare home, and I gave her a nickel. And the angel said, this doesn't make up for a life of greed. And the rich man said, well, now, wait a minute, because I have a consistent pattern of philanthropy. In 1945, I was coming out of my bank. It was Christmas time. There was a Salvation Army kettle, and I put a nickel in there. And so the angel turns back to St. Peter and says, what in the world are we going to do with this man? And St. Peter said, give him back his 15 cents and tell him to go to hell. You see, it's not charity that we want. What we want is economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. That's what America stands for. Meanwhile, we've got our wars on. Iraq, we were told just last month it's over. On August 18th, the last combat division crossed the border from Iraq into Kuwait. Obama himself gave a speech saying it's time to turn the page. Well, I'm sure that Sergeant Brandon Maggart would like to do that, but he can't. He's dead. Sergeant Maggart, 24 years old, from Kirksville, Missouri, he was killed on August 22nd, giving him the distinction of being the first to be killed in action after the war ended. As Lily Tomlin has said, no matter how cynical you get, it's almost impossible to keep up That war has not ended, and it's not going to end anytime soon. Meanwhile, we've got Afghanistan. Now, can somebody here please tell me, what's the purpose? What's the national interest? What's the strategy? What's the meaning? What the hell is going on? Now, going into the 10th year of this war, the longest war in American history, 1,300 Americans dead, 7,300 grievously wounded. As of yesterday, $331,856,755,497 of our tax dollars have been allocated to this war, adding $7 billion a month to the war in Afghanistan. How many more will die and be wounded? How much more will we be asked to spend? We're told, well, we have to buck up Hamid Karzai's government to create a quasi-stable state there. Well, excuse me, but Hamid Karzai doesn't have a government. He has a kleptocracy. He has a place that ought to be called Corruptistan. If you rolled Tom DeLay, Jack Abramoff, and Bernie Madoff all into one person, that person would be Hamid Karzai. Who wants to die for Karzai? What are we doing? It's time to bring them home. And speaking of killing, this year, BP killed 11 men and caused unfathomable economic and ecological damage in the Gulf of Mexico. While Massey Energy killed 29 mine workers in West Virginia, yet not one profiteering corporate executive has been charged with a crime, much less done jail time. Speaking of criminals, this January, 5 judicial thugs on the Supreme Court pulled off a black-robed coup on our democracy, decreeing that an inanimate, insentient paper construct called a corporation is a person and is entitled to far more constitutional rights than we actual persons, as Tom Hartman just laid out. I mean, this puts the dumb in dumbfounding, doesn't it? I mean, yet our elected officials have done nothing to reverse the coup or to impeach the 5 perfidious twerps who betrayed us. Now, here's one that's beyond strange. Democrats are in power in Washington but are unwilling to use it for fear of alienating and angering the Republicans who, excuse me, lost the last election. Democrats in Congress on health care, on Wall Street reform, on jobs, on climate change, on the Supreme Court enthronement of corporations, basically slapping the wrists of the offenders. I've come to believe that it's time for an important step to be taken by the drug corporations in our country. They have a real public service to offer, and I would actually give them antitrust exemption. They can collude to do this. I would like the drug companies to get together and to invent a Viagra that would stiffen the backbones of the Democrats in Congress. We could use tax dollars for that. And I don't mean to be a total downer on this. Thank God for Russ Feingold. Thank God and Wisconsin for Russ Feingold. Meanwhile, across the aisle, the Republicans have decided to throw out their hardcore right-wingers like Murkowski of Alaska and Bennett of Nevada and replace them with hardcore Palinista kooks, just complete, bull-goose, crazy people. We must kill Social Security, they say. Stop picking on BP, they insist. Stop paying unemployment benefits because it just encourages the unemployed to stop looking for jobs. Keep government out of Medicare, they demand. They're as confused as goats on AstroTurf. I got a friend down in Austin, Texas. He comes from Lubbock, Texas. He's a singer, a great one too. Butch Hancock. He's part of the Flatlanders, they're called. Jimmy Dale Gilmore, Butch Hancock, and Joe Ely. Great group, yeah. Butch Hancock was on my radio show once, and we were talking. He explained how it was very hard to be raised out in Lubbock, Texas, because everybody out there is a member of the Church of Christ. And he said that's sort of a punitive, negative sort of religion. And he said that they grew up as teenagers. He said that they were told that sex was the filthiest, nastiest thing on earth, and you should save it for someone you love. So that explains a whole lot about Lubbock, Texas. Right there. Well, in all of this strangeness, the core issue is, of course, corporate power. You don't have to be in who's who to know what's what, do you? They're stealing our democracy. These corporate paper constructs, stealing our democracy, replacing it with their plutocracy, their autocracy, their kleptocracy. Now, we could cry about this. What are we supposed to do? We could cry about it. We could laugh at the absurdity. We could go bowling. I don't know what would be possible. But no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is what democracy fighters always do, and that is to fight. This is our job. Organize, mobilize, reach out, build. Some say, well, it's hopeless. Corporations have too much power. They've got all the money. They've got the politicians. Ordinary people can't beat off corporate power. Well, bovine excrement, we can too. Got a friend down in Texas who's been a pioneer in the organic movement. He said that those who say it can't be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. And that would be you. You, right here in Wisconsin. All across, where ordinary people are fighting back. Democracy, after all, is our job. And in fact, you got the card right here, Fighting Bob himself. We are slow to realize that democracy is life and involves continual struggle. Your own Fighting Bob. That's the truth of it. Democracy is not Obama's job. It's not the Democratic Party's job. It's our job. Always has been. In my last book, I told a story in there about a guy who had gone to Bangkok, a tourist, on vacation, and he came out of the great temple, and in the glare of the sunlight, over there was a monk in full regalia. So the tourist indicated, could I snap your picture? The monk nodded and posed. He snapped the picture. Over here was a boy selling water, and he went over to buy a bottle of water for the monk. And he paid for it, but he waited for his change, but it was not forthcoming. And he said to the boy, he thought there might be a language problem, pointing to his palm, he said, "Don't I get change?" And the boy looked up at him and looked over at the monk and said, in perfect English, "Change comes from within." And of course, it does. From within our own hearts, from within our own communities, from within our own grassroots neighborhoods, our grassroots power. That's the change. And that change is developing all across America. You're having victories right here. We too often talk about what's wrong and how tough it is, but in fact, we're winning again and again and again. You're winning at a local level, and that's where the fight's got to be. How do we get this done, this democracy thing? Well, by joining our plethora of progressive efforts into an actual movement. That is our next step, I think. I'm not talking about one big meeting or one big organization, but an interrelated, quasi-cooperative movement that actually moves. Wouldn't that be interesting? We don't have to create the movement itself. The components are already there. We've got organizers, we've got trainers, we have media people, we have some funders, we've got messengers, we have all kinds of issue groups from environment to labor, food, education, gay, lesbian, right on down the line, anything you want to talk about. We've got components of a movement, but those components are not connected. You notice that? We're a series of very compatible but totally separated issue groups. We don't know each other. We don't work together for broad structural change that would benefit us all and make the whole of our effort bigger than the individual parts of that effort. This is our next step. Louis Grizzard, the late great Southern humorist, once said something that we in the South have long known to be true, and that is there's a great big difference between being naked and being naked. Naked means you have no clothes on. Naked, that means you have no clothes on and you are up to something. That's us. We got to get naked. This is the next step for us, is to make those connections. I urge you to work on this in the next year, between now and your next Bobfest. Meet in your own communities, discuss, invent ways to link people on this side of town with people on that side of town, people who are doing this with people who are doing that. And I would urge you to focus on the big structural changes that all progressives would benefit from. Public financing of our elections, for example. Development of local economies, non-corporate local economies. Overturn that Citizen United ruling. Something called the precautionary principle, which says that in medicine and environmental issues that any corporation can do it as long as they prove to us that it will cause no damage. Right now we have the reverse. We have to prove to them that it does do damage. That burden needs to be shifted. These are the kinds of big structural changes that make a difference for all of us. People are ready for this, and that's kind of my final point here. I'm sure you've been waiting on that. Even eager for it. I'm not talking just about card-carrying liberals, but just ordinary folks. I was out in New Mexico recently with my friend Fred Harris, who used to be a great U.S. senator and ran a great presidential campaign, in fact, 76, right here in Wisconsin. Fred said back then, you can't have a mass movement without the masses. And we do need to reach out to make that happen. And they're waiting for us. Even a bunch of those Tea Party folks who've been confused, used, and abused by the corporate interests actually totally agree with us on most of these corporate issues. Take that Citizen United Supreme Court decision. 86% of the American people opposed that decision. 76% of Republicans opposed it. We don't have to create public support for it. It's there on any of these issues we've been talking about. So we've got to reach out to those people, working locally to reach out to them. Down at the Chat and Chew Cafe, at the bar, in the supermarket line, in the union workplace, wherever you are. Begin to talk to people. And I think Ed and I have been talking, and others of you have too, I know. I think we probably need to take Bobfest on the road, don't you? Yeah. Let's go to Green Bay, or Oshkosh, by gosh, or Racine, out west to Eau Claire. Let's get out there. Get with the people where they live. Milwaukee, for damn sure, yeah. Another way to do it is to have potluck suppers in your own community. That's a way to meet people and begin to talk, this side of town with that side of town. You know, the people are busy, right? They got family, they got to feed the kids got homework to do. It's a big rush in life today. Well, that's what a potluck supper does. Supper served. You bring a dish, everybody brings a dish. There's supper right there. Bring the kids. Have a little music. Nothing wrong with that. I love the music over here in the beer garden. It's just fabulous. Music teaches us in ways that speeches and reading material can't. Have a little red wine and beer, by God. You know, we got to lubricate the movement. I mean, get it out there. Get to know each other. And then this home that's holding the potluck this week, they're in charge of the program. They will tell you what they think about what's going on, what's important to them, the kind of issue that they're involved in. Then next week, we're on another side of town, and they're in charge of the program. So we get to know each other, and we join in these efforts, and we rub up against each other, and we begin to trust each other. That's a movement, when you trust each other. Other ways, form a speakers bureau. the old-time populists in the 1870s and 80s, they had 40,000 members of their speakers bureau. 40,000 people could go out and give the speech on any day or night. We don't have 40 who are doing this. You can do that in your own community. You've got speech teachers in high schools and in your colleges who will teach people how to give the speech. It's not that hard, learn to do it. And learn to use Mr. Humor. He's our friend, Learn to tell stories. Those of us on the left, we like to dump our full load of facts on everybody. You meet them casually. Well, did you know this about that? Let me just tell you. Well, it's so much better to tell a story, My friend Van Jones points out that Martin Luther King Jr. Did not say, "I have a position paper." So we need to learn how to communicate. And then begin to have big talk, not just small talk down at the Chat and Chew or in the bar. Once a week, set aside an hour. All right, we'll gather around the table here and we'll talk about something. And one person's kind of in charge of the discussion this week, another person next week. Just begin to have these discussions. We got the Tea Party movement. We could use a beer party movement, don't you think? Let's get together. Or invent your own technique, and that's the thing. The answer is not going to come from any one person. None of the people you've heard from today, and certainly not me, have the answer. And that's the truth. We spend too much time waiting for somebody to tell us what to do. Well, the answer is in you. You tell us what to do. Let 1,000 ideas bubble up from the grassroots level, and then those will sort out, and we'll have something going. I'll leave you with this thought. It's something when I first moved into Austin, Texas, there was a moving company there that had an advertising slogan that I liked, so I stole it for political purposes. I think they were called Skeeter and Booger's Moving Company, something like that, And they had an ad in the Yellow Pages. It was terrific. It said, "If we can move it," I'm sorry, "if we can get it loose, we can move it." Now, right there's the thing, and if you'll get it loose at a grassroots level, the people will move it for themselves. Thank you very much for what you're doing. Proud to be with you. Thank you. Thank you, Wisconsin. Thanks a million.